Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about sleds. In the wintertime, it is much easier to carry all of the extra gear that you're going to be dealing with by towing it on a sled over the snow. So much easier than carrying it on your back. I have 3 sleds here. Let's start with the smallest one, the greenie here. This is just to carry my large backpack and tripod, maybe a couple other bits and pieces. It's small, it's basic, it's just a kid's snow sled. This one here is made by ERA, and it's an expedition sled. And then the third one is made by Pulk, and you can see these in hunting stores and so forth, or fishing stores where they use them for ice fishing, carrying all your gear out onto the ice. Now, I have the 3 different types for 3 different purposes. The first one is just if I'm on a day trip and I'm going to be crossing a fair bit of ground. I don't want to be carrying stuff on my back, so maybe I've got a backpack, a tripod, a chair, maybe some camouflage. It all gets a bit much, especially when you're walking through deep snow, and I just detest snowshoes. So if I have to use them, it's even worse. So a nice sled like this, you just chuck everything on. It's not that large, it's about 1 meter long, and away you go, simple. The only adjustments that I've made is to put a towing loop through each hole. You can see here it's just very super simple. There are no metal fixings, no screws and hooks and loops. It's just a piece of rope knotted so that the loops don't fall out, and super simple. Takes about 3 or 4 minutes to get this sled operational. The ERA Pro sled is a lot nicer for traveling long distances. It's got a narrow width to it, a narrow gauge, and so it slides along much easier than the larger sleds like this one. You can find all sorts of YouTube videos describing how to set these things up. They can get really complicated. This is super simple. I have 2 loops at the front, by rope underneath. The rope I can actually use to grab hold of and pull the sled over any logs or ditches if need be. Normally I don't. Usually I just keep walking and it slides right over. And I can also use these loops to hang it up on the wall when I'm not using it. As you can see, they're just simple loops, knotted so that they stay in place. You can actually run the cable all the way around as one piece, but this is just a lot simpler, a lot easier, a lot quicker. I have a loop at the back as well, a single loop in the middle, just to help tie down the load. And the most complicated thing about this sled is the fact that I have put runners underneath using high density plastic. And the purpose of that is that these things do wear out, and if you're dragging over hard ice, they might wear away your sled. So I've got some heavy duty plastic that I've cut into strips with my skill saw, and then I just drill and countersink. And on the inside, as you can see, I've got the tips protected so they don't cut into my load, with these little dome screw nuts on top. But this is super simple. I've seen people go to enormous lengths of putting heavy metal fittings on these things and all sorts of convoluted straps and so forth. You just don't need it. I use bungee cords just to hold everything down. You can get as complicated as you want, but frankly, you can have one of these set up without the runners underneath that I've put on. You can have this set up in about half an hour if you're just using rope like I have here. And finally, let's look at the Pelican. This is slightly more complicated because I've put in a strip here to help distribute the weight while I'm towing, because this does take a lot of weight. I can put 70 kilos into this thing without even blinking, and it takes it quite well. As you can see, this also has the plastic strips that I've cut, around about 25 mil wide, and then I've countersunk and screwed. And then inside, again, I've got the little caps so that it doesn't tear up anything that I've got sitting in the sled. Usually with this, I just throw everything in, and then I have a cover that Pelican make that goes over the top, and then over the top of that I have a cargo net, a cheap cargo net I got from the local hardware store. You can get them from Amazon as well. With this one I just use bungee cords over the top, and same with this one here, just bungee cords. They just hook underneath the lip. If I have any serious weight, I'd probably just put a few more loops in, but this, as I said, is just for, you know, a backpack, a camouflage hide, and a tripod. So how do you carry these things? Again, people get really super complicated. I bought some electrical conduit, plastic conduit tubing, 3 meters long, cut it in half. Through that, I place a rope all the way through, and then one of these little clips on each end. You can get a little more complicated with this by putting in a locking clip. I've had these come undone on occasion, but it's been nothing serious. I've seen people make telescoping versions of this, which is again very complicated. However, if you're wearing just boots, and then the next day you're wearing snowshoes, and the next day you're wearing skis, you are going to have different lengths of this tube for those devices to be used in front of the sled without catching on the front of the sled. But I use either snowshoes or just boots. I don't use cross-country skis. So I only have one set of these tubes at one length. There's a little bit of Velcro that I have here, and that enables me to have these crossed over. That will actually make traveling a little more under control. Now, some people I've seen have just used rope to tow their sled, which is fine if that's what you like. However, if you've got any type of downhill slope, the sled's going to take off and it's going to hit you in the backs, in your Achilles tendons and the backs of your legs, which can be painful and super annoying. So using a solid structure like this enables you to tow your sled. You can even lean back on it if you want to take a little breather, because these will support your weight to a small degree. But I just keep everything super simple, and that's how I set up my sleds, my Pulks, as they call them in Europe. One other modification I've made to this sled is, as you can see, I've curled the front up. When you buy these, it's actually curled down, which if you're in deep snow, it can dig in and it can be really annoying. So I just used a blowtorch on the back, just gently, and bent this up. So now if I hit a snowbank or so forth, it's not going to dig in, it's going to tend to rise up. While a wider Pulk will add more drag, more friction, it does carry a much greater payload. Plus, you can also stack it higher because there is that wider girth and it's a little more stable in the snow. But they are definitely harder to pull, so they're great for short journeys where you need a lot of equipment. You can see it here with the cargo net applied, and I've even got a little seat sitting on top so I can take a breather. So many times I've heard people say you need to have a proper sled harness or Pulk harness in order to pull your sled. Frankly, I don't see the point. It's more money to spend. It's another piece of equipment to keep track of. It's just extra weight that you've got to carry. If you're like me, traveling in a few hours and then setting up camp and staying for a few days to take photographs or whatever, I don't see the point. I would much rather just use my backpack. They're just as comfortable and they're almost as light as a sled harness. You can see here that I've put some loops on the base of my backpack. There are many different ways of doing that. You just clip the sled on through using your poles and away you go. The one thing I must say though, if you're doing that, you need to empty your backpack completely. Maybe just have a couple of little light items in it. I have it empty, and then when I need to get rid of a layer, I might put that in the backpack, or I just might add it to the sled. Here I've got a bottle of coffee in the side pocket. Normally I would take that out and just put it onto the sled. If it's light, it's easy to use, it's comfortable, and it's not another piece of equipment that you have to drag around and keep track of. Now I understand why someone would want to use a harness instead of a backpack. For example, a person who's traveling from point A to point B only and not stopping and camping to do wildlife photography, they don't need a backpack at all. They just need to tow their sled. So as wildlife photographers though, we're probably going to need our backpack after we've set up camp to go out, carry our camera gear, carry some food and so forth for a day's outing before we head back to camp. So we're going to have our backpack with us anyway, so no need doubling up with a harness as well. Whereas a person who's just traveling, hiking point A to point B over 1, 2, 3 days or a week or a month, and they're not using a backpack for anything except for towing, then a harness is a much more logical solution to the issue. The reason many people use duffels in the sled is twofold. First, it keeps snow out of your equipment. It just makes it generally tidier, and it stops loose items from falling out and losing them in the snow on your travels. However, they're not vital when it comes to the wider sleds such as the Pelican. The cover that you can buy will keep any loose items from falling out, and the wider profile of the sled means that everything is laying lower and there's less tendency to fall out. So just the cover's enough, and then maybe, as shown here, the cargo net to keep things all together. The duffel bag that you see here is a little over 1.2 meters long, almost 1.3, and it fits pretty well into the expedition sled. The point is that it's not so much what you use to hold your gear in, it's how you pack it, and what you need to do is make sure that all of your heavy items such as fuel or any liquids or any metal items, keep them right at the bottom of the sled. And here you can see on top I've just got some clothing, a rubbish bag, a top that I'm not using at the time, and my binoculars sitting on top, so it's very bottom weighted, and it makes it a lot more stable. The bottom line is, in winter we're usually carrying more equipment, so using a sled is a no-brainer. Pick one that suits your style of hiking, whether short distance or long distance, the amount of equipment that you need, and make it as simple or as complex as you want when it comes to the fittings and the straps and the loops and so forth. But you really don't need to make it overly complicated to make it work. That's the point here. I strongly suggest that you use not just a plain rope for towing, but to use the poles. Enjoy your winter expeditions, and I'll see you out on the ice.